All right, my name is Mike Zellers, as you can see here. CISS216, the web development. So I hope you're all in the right place. If not, maybe I can help you find the place you're supposed to be. I don't do like many professors do and review the syllabus. I trusted all of you to read it on your own time and to bring any questions that you have to class, either ask me in class or email me the questions. I do want to talk a little bit about how this course is structured, because some people get a little confused about what it is and how it's structured. This class is known as this is a blended class, all right, and it is known by the name that I didn't make up, by the way, high flex. That sounds like something you'd put in your car to make it perform better or something. But high flex means that it is meant to be highly flexible. All right. So in what ways is the class flexible? The class is flexible this way. For each lecture, you have 3 options. All right. You may attend the class in person, like those of you sitting in front of me are doing right now. You may attend the class synchronously via WebEx, as this person is doing right now. Finally, if you're not able to, you are able to watch the video of the class afterwards. Now, each one of those has its advantages and disadvantages, and it's not like you have to pick one and stick with it the entire semester. You can do whatever you want on any given lecture day. All right. And the advantage of being in person is some people relate better to a class and to the professor if they're there physically with them in the same room and can ask questions and so on. The advantage of doing it synchronously is that students are not, students have the convenience of not having to be on campus, but yet can interact with me synchronously. In other words, they can ask me, if a student has a question right now, they can ask me the question right now. All right. And for the students that are watching this on WebEx, either turn your mic on and just shout out the question when you have a question, or if you prefer, put it in chat, put it in WebEx chat. And I should be able to pick it up. And if I don't see your question at first, maybe wait a minute, then turn on your mic and shout so that I can hear you. The advantage of watching it asynchronously, that is watching the recording of the class later on today, is that you can do it at your own convenience. All right, so the point is like if you take another job during the semester and your shift changes and you could no longer come and meet in person, that's okay. Just watch the video. If you have to stay home with your sick child because they can't go to school that day, hey, just watch it on WebEx if you want to. Finally, if you're having maybe a little bit of extra trouble on a section, if there's just something that you're not quite catching or understanding, then maybe it's a good idea to come in person for those classes. But you can pick and choose the classes. Now, in some cases, like next Monday, I will publish a lecture from a previous semester. So we only meet in person 1 day a week. We only meet in person Monday. All right. Like for next week, this class, the material is pretty consistent, like the way that I cover it and the order that I covered in. So I'll just publish a video from last semester and it should work fine for you. Now, the lab is structured the same way. All right. The lab is structured the same way in that we have a lab, for those of you who are here with me, right across the hall in BU 102. That begins immediately after the lecture, or actually it begins at 10 o'clock and goes from 10 to 10:50. You can come to that lab. You can also connect to me via WebEx during that period if you have questions. Real nice thing about WebEx is you can actually share your screen with me. So if you're running into problems with a program or with something, I can actually see what it's doing on your end and help you diagnose the problem. Or you can contact me and we can arrange other times to meet up. I try to be as flexible as possible. If you can't meet with me during the designated lab hours, send me an email indicating that you want to meet with me and give me a selection of times. Like say I can do it Monday afternoon, Tuesday morning, or Wednesday evening. And if you give me a broad enough selection of times, I'm pretty sure I can find a time that I can meet with you. All right. So keep that in mind. Now, well, our official lab session is Mondays from 10 to 10:50. You're welcome to drop in on any of my other lab sessions. So for example, today between 2 and 3, I'm in BU 210. And you're welcome to come to that lab if you have questions, or you're welcome to log on via WebEx to connect with me. If anyone has trouble with WebEx, let me know and I can give them a hand walking through that. Email me. I welcome emails. I invite you. I would rather you email me when you're not sure about something than struggle with it and try to figure out yourself. You know, it's a great quality for students to like try to figure out things themselves, but sometimes you get stuck on something and some students try to be persistent when maybe it's best for them to just ask a question and I can put them back on track. Now, if you ask me a question, if you're working on a particular project, zip up all your files and attach it to the message. All right. Send it through Canvas email and zip up all your files and attach it to your message. Give as complete and specific description of your issue as possible and include screen captures if it will help explain the problem. So, for example, like later on when we get in cascading style sheets, we learn how to change the colors of things on a web page. If you have code that you think should make the header on the top of the page blue and it's not blue, say that. Don't just say my page doesn't work, because you know it might be confusing. What about it doesn't work? You know, I don't know that you want the header on the top of the page to be blue. You have to tell me that. All right. So be as specific as possible and include all the files in your message. And following this procedure will allow you to get a better answer quicker. Like if you send me a question, like why doesn't my lab 2 work? You know, and I've gotten emails similar to that, you know, with no files attached, no screenshots, just like my lab 2 doesn't work. It's like, okay, well, what are you running into? What is the code? That email exchange can take a couple days to work its way out, depending on how frequently I and you check your email. So therefore, it's best to ask a good question right up front to get the best answer possible as quickly as possible. And that's how the class is set up. My aim is to be flexible. I recognize that everyone in this class has multiple responsibilities. I assume you do anyhow. All right. And it is set up to be as flexible as possible to help you manage all your responsibilities, including this class. I want to give you every opportunity to succeed in this class. And let me tell you, if you put in the work, you will succeed in this class. That's sort of I sound like a used car dealer here, but that's sort of my Mike Zeller's CISS216 guarantee. You put in the work, if you ask the questions, you will succeed in this class. The students that don't succeed in the class are the students that disappear. Stop coming to class, stop watching lectures, just sort of drop out. And if you need to do that for whatever reasons, then by all means, you know, there's a mechanism in place for you to drop the class. But don't stay in the class and simply not do the work. Late work. I have a long paragraph about late work that I need to probably revise on my syllabus because it goes on too long. I could probably cut it down and be more concise. Here's how late work works in this class. I will not deduct if I sort of understand what's going on and why the assignment is late. Now, I don't need details. If it's a personal problem, you don't need to tell me the details of the personal problem. But maybe drop me a line that says, I'm going to be late with this assignment because I have a personal problem. I'm going to be late with this assignment because I haven't been feeling good. I am going to be late with this assignment because I have to work extra hours at work, whatever. If you do that, I'm fine with it. Late work doesn't affect you too much until the very end of the semester. The very end of the semester, everything has to be by a deadline. But up to that point, if you're a little late with something, that's fine. Now, if you're habitually late with something, that means that you're falling behind in the class and it's going to be really hard at some point to catch up. So by all means, try to turn things in. Try to turn assignments in on time. I'm not saying you have a license to turn things in late, but be in communications with me. Now, if all of a sudden week 4, I've never talked to you before and you just turn in an assignment, I'll deduct points for that, for being late. All right. And yeah, I don't need to know your business if it's something that you don't want to go into details about. All right. Most of the action in this class happens on the modules section. And I have something about going forward that sort of repeats the information that I had gave you a few minutes ago. Each week is going to have things in it like this. Information, week 1 has some class information, has a list of things to do this week. The fair use guidelines talks about using pictures from the web. The too long didn't read version of this is that you can use images from a website for educational purposes, and as long as you give them credit, just like you give credit to something you quoted in a term paper. Here you have your lab assignments, and I'll put any example code here. This is also where the video for the class will appear after the lecture is done. It usually takes probably within an hour after class, but that can vary. If something comes up and I'm especially busy in lab, then it might be a few hours after class. Definitely, I would say by this evening, it'll be posted. All right. Are there any questions about any of this kind of stuff? Okay, Kathy, what's the question?
I'm in your 243 and 232
Can you turn on your mic?
Oh, sure. It is on. Can you not hear me? Here, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Professor Zellers? Can you hear me?
If that's not working, can you try typing in chat?
Sure.
I'm looking for 243 and 232 lectures. You'll find them in the classes for 232 and 243. All right. Since we have not had any lectures in this class yet, they will not be posted. Is there a live lecture weekly? Yes, there is. We have one in-person live lecture per week in 4 of my core classes. Those of you that might be taking more than one of my classes: CISS216, CISS216, which is Java, CISS232, which is client server scripting, and CISS243, which is web database integration. So those classes are run like this class. The time for WebEx in the syllabus. Well, I mean, I can look. For 232,
Or it's in the modules.
I can tell you that it's not, if there's a typo in here. 232 is in person on Tuesdays.
WebEx.
So if there's a mistake in this, so send me a screen print of it and I'll take care of it. All right, let's get into the actual class information. Thing that you'll find is we are 1 for 1 so far. Let's keep track of that.
Does this happen every time?
It happens almost every time. It's uncanny. It's like
So 1 for 1.
1 for 1. All right. Yeah, we're on the street. All right. Let's talk about web pages. All right. Now, if you go to any web page, let's say we go to Loring Community College's web page, you see a bunch of stuff. All right. You see some plain old text. You see images. You see headlines. Like this, I would say this is a headline. This is just plain old text. And you see links. You also see a text box and a button that we'll cover later on in the class. All right. Web pages are made up of plain text files. Does anyone know what it means when I say a plain text file? Well, I mean that there's just letters and stuff that you could type on the keyboard. There's no special binary codes or anything like that. There is just, for the most part, just characters that you can type on a keyboard. In fact, we can look at the source for this page and we can see and we can read it, and it's just plain text. In this class, we're going to learn 2 languages fairly well, and a 3rd language we'll be introduced to. We're going to learn HTML, which specifies the content of a page. We are also going to learn CSS, which designates the appearance of the page. We will touch on JavaScript at the end of the semester, which covers the behavior of a page, like something like this. You put your mouse on something that appears. That's behavior, all right? And that's done in JavaScript. The fact that this is blue and these are white is controlled via CSS. The fact that this is a link to a web page is HTML. And we can see some of the things in here, and we can notice if you look, we see things that look like, let's see if I can find a good one. We see things look like this, section, and we see things that look like this, \section. The way that we designate what something on the page means is through the use of what we call tags. Tags are sometimes called markup, right? Some of you, when you have a class and when you're taking a class and you have a textbook for it, you might use a highlighter to mark up your textbook. What does that mean? Like if I say something is important, and it's on page 25, you might take a highlighter and highlight. And you're marking up that page. You're marking up the content in that book. Tags in HTML are similar. They're used to describe what a particular piece of text on the page means. Now, I have an example already made that I'm going to pull up, and we'll use it to discuss and introduce you to tags. First of all, we're going to study a couple ways that you can edit a web page. But initially, we're going to use Notepad simply because every Windows machine and the machines in the lab are Windows, and many of you have Windows machines. If you have a Mac, we can talk about it. But every Windows machine has Notepad on it. So I'm going to right mouse and I'm going to open this with, it does not give me that choice. I'm going to choose another app. Oh, go down, more apps, and I'm going to open it in Notepad. So this is a web page. It's a very short and simple web page, but it's a web page. Now, let's look at this, for example. And we'll expand it to cover all the other tags. Well, no, actually, I changed my mind. Let's look at this. Let's view the page in the web browser. Now, the way that you view the page in the web browser is by double-clicking it. And here's the web page. So you're able to see a web page two different ways. And it's important to keep that in mind. It's not like there's two different files. There's two different ways of looking at a web page. Just like if you compare an X-ray with a photograph of you. You know, there's still one you, right? They're just different views of you. One shows your bones and stuff. One shows the surface of your body, your skin and your face and so on. All right. So this is what the outside world's going to see of this page when it's published to the web, viewing it in the browser. This is what you as a developer needs to know, right? And needs to make the code to get it to work correctly. Now, notice that welcome to fall semester is larger than the other text on the screen. It's larger because we have specified that that text is a heading by the H1 tag. Now let's look at the tag and let's analyze how the way the tag works. This is what's called the start tag. This is where the special formatting begins for a tag. In other words, if there was anything before this, there's any stuff before the header, it's not a headline. Any stuff after the header is also not a headline. Okay, so this H1 says here's where the header starts. The end H1 tag is this. And it's just like the start tag, except it has a slash in front of the tag name. So this is an H1 tag. This is a start H1 tag. This is an end H1 tag. Okay. And everything in between it is the contents of that H1 tag, and that gets treated like an H1 tag. Now, what do I mean by treated like an H1 tag? Well, H1 stands for a top-level heading. So by default, the browser will make the top-level heading bigger than other text. All right? Now, I'm just going to put this out there, and we'll come back to it later on, not today, but some other day. Through CSS, we can change the browser defaults. So I could make it through CSS code, I could make this even bigger if I wanted it. Or I can make it green, or I can make it bold, or whatever I wanted. So by default, the browser has a default behavior or a default appearance for each tag. And through CSS, we can change that. But for now, we're just going to look at the browser's default appearance. Well, the browser's default appearance for the H1 tag is to make it big. What do you suppose would happen if I forgot the end H1 tag? Any thoughts? Take a guess in your mind what's going to happen. There's a couple logical options, all right? Maybe nothing wrong will happen. Maybe everything on the page is going to be big. Maybe I'm going to get an error and the page won't display. That's probably the three possibilities. Pick in your head which one of those you think is going to happen. Okay, well, not everything is bigger, but stuff is bigger that shouldn't be. You've broken the rules of HTML by doing this. You have a start tag without an ending tag. And if you do that, the browser is going to guess at what you mean. All right? The browser will guess what you mean. And here's the interesting thing. Sometimes it guesses correctly, and sometimes you get exactly what you want anyhow. All right? Sometimes it guesses incorrectly. It typically will not blow up, though. All right? HTML is different if you've had other programming languages like C# or even JavaScript or Java or whatever. Whereas if you make an error, if you violate the rules of the language, it just won't run. Web pages and browsers are very resilient that way. Is if you give it wrong code, it will try its best to make some sense of it. But it may not always look the way that you want it to. All right? Therefore, your best bet to work across multiple browsers is by following the rules of HTML. So the rules of HTML is that most tags require an ending tag. And that simply says this is the end of the heading. Therefore, when I put the ending tag back in, we get back to where I wanted to be. Next thing is a paragraph. All right. Paragraph tag says it is a paragraph. And what do we mean by paragraph? Means that it's going to start on a new line. I think our semester ends December 14th. Don't quote me. Okay, go ahead.
17th?
17th. That sounds better.
Yeah.
All right. Because I have two paragraphs, this starts on a new line, this starts on a new line. Paragraphs and H1s, and in fact, every tag on this page is what is called a block tag. A block tag means that it starts on a new line. So H1 is a block tag. Therefore, it's not put right side by side with this. It's on its own line. This paragraph is on its own line. This paragraph is another H1, H2, and so on down the line. So later on, we'll learn some inline tags where it doesn't start on a new, and just for an example, There's an M tag that means emphasis. So if I want to emphasize the words Lorain Community College, I could put it in an M tag. And it makes it, and by default, it makes it in italics. Now, I could, through CSS, I could change that, but we're talking browser defaults here. That's an inline tag because it doesn't start with that on a new line. Notice something about the way this is written. This is written where fall semester at Lorain County is on one line, community college begins on is on the second line, and August 22nd, which is not correct, August 28th. Is on a third line. Yet when we view the page in the browser, everything's on one line. Well, that's the way that the browser treats what's called white space. White space is anything that doesn't have a character, so like a tab, a space, tab or space, usually what we're talking about, and or a new line. If you hit enter and just create a new line. The browser takes any white space that you have and converts it to a single space. I can space it out like that and save it. Doesn't look any different. Now, it might seem weird and annoying. It's actually good. It's good for this reason. You can only undo one thing in Notepad. It's good for this reason. If you get a large web page, very large web page, you're going to have a lot of tags on it. And you might have a lot of text on it. If you formatted it, you may format it, or you want to format it, let's put it that way. You want to format it in a way that's easy for you to read. All right? For example, if this was all in one long line, especially if there was more content in it, you'd have to do some sideways scrolling to see the whole thing. That wouldn't be good. And so on. Yet, if it actually paid attention to these things, the browser would have trouble when it tries to display it. So for example, the browser's smart enough to take and wrap that paragraph around if the window is too small for it. If the browser paid attention to this, then your code would look the same on a wide window or on a narrow window. You don't want that. You want typically you want your text to adjust to the size of the window without horizontal scrolling, if possible. So my suggestion to you is to organize the page in a way that makes it easy to read. So I kind of exaggerated that here just by putting a little bit of text on each line. But even with longer text, the same thing applies. Also notice that these tags are indented. Why are they indented? They're indented because I am showing that this stuff is part of what's called the body of the page. We indent to show nesting of tags. What do I mean by nesting of tags? It means that if a tag starts in a tag, it ends within that tag. So this H1 starts inside the body tag. Therefore, it should end within the body tag. If I put this here, it's not properly nested. Because the H1 starts in the body tag, but the end H1 is in the P tag. And that's not valid HTML. What happens when you don't have valid HTML? Well, just as we described before, the browser guesses at what you mean. And it might guess right, it might guess wrong. Your best bet is to follow the rules. Notice in this example, the P tag, the start and end tag are on different lines. I could actually write this like this if I wanted it maybe even a little more easy to read. And we can do that all because how much white space we give doesn't change the way the browser interprets it. It reduces every section of white space to a single blank space. All right, other tags. We have the H1, which is a top level heading. By top level, I don't mean like top of the page. I mean like the top, the start of a section, like the top level headline. Like, did you might see something like, tropical storm headed for Florida. Then you might have a heading underneath it that says, is expected to touch ground in Jacksonville or whatever. All right. You have a top level heading and then you have a secondary heading. That's what these H1s and H2s are. H1s are top level headings. H2s are sort of subordinate endings. So this whole section is about Mike Zellers. This section is about his Monday schedule. This section is about his Tuesday schedule. So H1, H2, H3 doesn't mean it's the first header on the page, the second header, the third header. It means the level of the header, the logical. Think of it like an outline. All right. If you do an outline, you have your top level topics. Then each topic has a subtopic, and those topics can be broken down. Well, you can do that 6 times on a web page because there's H1 through H6. All right. If you have more than 6 levels deep of nesting, maybe your page is too complicated. Maybe you can reorganize the page. All right. We have a P that simply indicates a paragraph tag. It's going to start it in a new line. And we have an H2, which means it's a secondary heading. Monday schedule is a subtopic underneath the bigger topic of Professor Zellers. These 2 paragraphs are under the top level header of Welcome to Fall Semester. Now we have a few other tags on this page. And every web page you have should have these tags along with these tags on the bottom. This is not officially a tag. This is what's called a document, a declaration, type declaration. This indicates that this is a HTML file. All right. It's a file that contains HTML code. Now you might say, what other kind of web pages are there? Well, there can be for different purposes, different kinds of files. You could have an XML file for certain purposes. All right. In which case you have a different doc type. But all we're going to deal with in this class is HTML files. So doc type HTML should be the first line of any of your web pages. The second line is defining, again, repeating that this is an HTML document. It seems redundant, but you should do it. We'll talk about this lang equals en in a minute here. We then have a head section. The head section for now, all we're going to put in there is the title. And the title appears not part of the body of the page. See, all this stuff is the body of the page. The head is information about the page. And in this case, our title is first example, and that's what appears on the tab within the browser, first example. All your pages should have a title. Later on, we'll discover other things to put in the head. But for now, all we're going to talk about is the title. Then have a body tag. And the body tag should contain everything that's on the body of the page. Now, some students, I'll show you a common mistake students make. Common mistake for students is to think, well, this is a header or heading. It belongs in the head section. And we'll do that. That's not true. It belongs to the body because it's going to appear in the body. Now, here's the interesting thing. Browser gets it right, even if you put it in the head section. But that's still not good web development. So everything that's going to appear in the body of the page, that is that window, is going to be in the body section. These tags are nested. In other words, the HTML contains the head and it contains the body. The body is not part of the head. The head is not part of the body. We're not talking about anatomy here. We're talking about web pages, all right? Just in case anyone walks by and wonders like why I just said the head's not part of the body. They are both tags underneath the HTML tag. Now, about this EN. This is what's called an attribute. All right. An attribute is extra information about a tag. So we're going to have the language equals EN in this case. In other words, we're telling the browser that the language, to assume that the language is English. This helps do any number of things. You know, helps Google search get it right. You know, if you encoded that it was in Spanish, it would show up for people that did a search for Spanish language pages or whatever. I believe that's one of the things it's used for. But you should put in, and this would indicate that the page is in English. Now, how do you know you got your page right? I already said the fact that it displays right doesn't mean that the page is right. There's actually sort of a spell check for HTML. All right. You know, like in Word, you have spell check or grammar check. There's what's called an HTML validator. And upload a file, or I'm just going to paste the code in here. And I'm going to run it through the validator, and no errors or warnings. So this page passes a check. That means it is valid HTML code, and you've maximized your chances of this page looking the way that you want it to across browsers. Now, what if I did this? Let's make the mistake that I made earlier, and I put the end H1 at the end of the paragraph. It tells me that the P is not allowed as a child element of H1. What does that mean? That means that this paragraph, because I did not close the H1, this paragraph is part of the H1 tag. And therefore it tells me, hey, that paragraph is not allowed. And therefore, it doesn't recognize this paragraph tag or this paragraph tag. Therefore, it doesn't know what to do with the ending paragraph tag. Sometimes the errors are a little tricky to understand. At least it will point you in the right direction. And if you have any questions, you can always ask me. Now, I brought up this web page so I wouldn't have to type in front of class because I don't type very quickly. Notice when I saved it, so I saved it with a .html file extension. That's important. All right, the .html is a way to tell the operating system that this is a web page. So that when you double click on it, it will open up in a browser. Some machines are set up where they do not show file extensions. Like maybe you're one at home, or maybe one in, I think the labs are set up to show extents. But your Windows Explorer should be set to show file extensions so that you can see that for sure it ends with a .html. That'll become especially important when we get to images, because some images are HTML, or I'm sorry, some images are JPEG files, some images are GIFs, some are PNG files, and so on. So therefore, it's important to know, because you have to use the exact file name to pull up an image on your page. Now, if I was starting a web page for a first time, what would I do? If I'm using Notepad, I would fire up Notepad. I'd start typing my web page. Put my tags. Again, what tags do I need? I need an HTML tag. Language equals yeah. I need at least a head tag, title in it, head tag, my end head tag, body tag, and body tag. Two in one class, by the way, so we're ahead of the game. That's one to take care of the fact that we don't have class next Monday. Right? Remember, this class only meets in person on Monday, so we don't have class on the campus is closed for Labor Day on Monday. We don't meet on Monday. I'll instead have a lecture from previous semester. So I'll type in my code and I'll put all my stuff in here. I'll just put an H1 that says all my stuff. Title. Past. Okay. When I go to save it in Notepad, watch carefully. What I have to do is go up here and say save. I have to change this type from text documents to all files. I'll put it in the same folder. And then I need to type in the name of the file .html. So test.html. And now it's recognized as a web page, and I can bring it up. And the title is test, all my stuff. So in a nutshell, to open up a web page that's already created, you right mouse on it, say open with, and select Notepad. To create a new page, you would go into Notepad and you would do save as, change it to all files, and then put in the file name .html. Now, the thing to remember is you don't have two files associated with a web page. A lot of students get confused and think because we have it in Notepad, we have it in a browser, there's an HTML page and there's a text page. No, there's only one HTML file that can be viewed either in Notepad or in the browser. All right, just a quick word about labs. Labs, again, are in the same rule as this. You can come in via WebEx if you have any questions about lab. You can email your questions later, or you can ask me questions in lab. The first lab assignment is posted in the week 1 module. It's pretty straightforward. Let me know if you have any questions. Normally, the lab period is for you to work on your lab assignments. All right, so you can come use the computers here and work on your lab assignments. Any questions? All right, those of you going to lab, I'll see you over in lab. If not, have a good rest of week, and Memorial or Labor Day weekend.